provide an update and some comments.
Good afternoon. It's great to have the opportunity to be with you, although it's in a rather unusual forum. Appreciate very much y'all joining us today so that we could talk about some things that I think you will find to be of great interest to you, especially during these very challenging times. What I wanted to do very succinctly is to let you know a little bit about the fact that over the past few weeks, we've been making a conscious effort to assemble a rather substantial amount of resources that are available to you and certainly to our other members throughout the state. And frankly, we've also told others who are not members that we welcome their looking at the resources on our website, because a rising tide really lifts all boats. And so our industry needs to get strong and come back just as quickly as it can after we get this crisis in our rearview mirror. So point number one, I want to ask you to please check out the resources that we have compiled. They are on our website. We've been sending them to you regularly. Hopefully you've seen them and you have found them to be of some assistance to you. It's never been more important for you to contact your elected officials, especially the congressional delegation, and let them know of the fact that you want them to be supportive of our industry. Some of you have probably heard the somewhat alarming news that under the CARES Act, the PPP has run out of money. They did so this morning. Congress is going to get together rather quickly and authorize some additional funding. But that indicates to you what the demand is for those monies. Of course, they are earmarked for loans that can be forgiven. And the demand across the country has been beyond expectations of the folks at Capitol Hill. So if you have not done so already, please go ahead and contact your lenders and submit an application for those monies. It'll take a while for it to be processed, but they are being reviewed on a first come, first served basis. Part of what we have been doing here is to lay the groundwork for the time at which this crisis is beginning to abate. And we have established what we are calling the Hospitality Industry Resilience Task Force. It's a public-private partnership made up of folks from throughout the state. And what we are specifically doing, and I want to ask y'all to please help us with this, is we're reaching out to our members throughout the entire state and saying, look, what do you think would be the best practices for our state to have as we begin to reopen the restaurants and the hotels across South Carolina? You should have received an email yesterday announcing the fact that we have put this task force together. And in that email, it provides instructions and directions on how your input can be sent to us. But if for some reason you have not seen that email, you may go to our website and look under COVID-19, and we've got a link set up to that information there on the website. So please pass along your comments. Time is of the essence. We need you to do that by Tuesday. We've got some folks at the University of South Carolina who are on standby to take our information and develop a plan that focuses on the first 30 days. We're not going to try to make it all-encompassing at this juncture, because the first 30 days may show us some things that, frankly, we didn't anticipate. And so one tenet of this plan is that its flexibility. Before passing this along for the first speakers to be introduced, I want want to especially not only thank them for what they have been doing, the folks with COVID, but I want to especially thank Mollie O'Dell. The National Restaurant Association has been scheduling telephone conference calls with us, with the state restaurant associations, 2 of them a week for some time now. And they've been extremely helpful. Also, the National Restaurant Association has disseminated a lot of information to keep us up to date and better positioned to be able to answer your questions as they have come up. Also, Mollie is on the creative side of the NRA, and so she's got some things up her sleeve that I look forward to seeing what they are. She's been alluding to them for some time. But Mollie, thank you for being here. And again, many, many thanks to each of you for what you are doing. Let's stay strong together during this difficult time. And we are here to help you. So whatever you need, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we'll do absolutely the best we can to ensure that we can work through it together. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Randy to introduce our first speakers. And again, take care.
Again, I'd like to thank Colite International, Marty Brown, CEO, and Harold Reaves, both from Colite, for being our guest speakers today, and I'll turn it over to them.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. This is Marty Brown, and I appreciate the chance to talk to you today about some technologies that we've been developing that will help in the future. Might not be applied to what you're thinking right now until the business gets back to normal, but we'll go through it, and I'll tell you about some of these technology. Linz is going to go through the slides for me. I'm going to get started and try to go through this pretty quickly. There's a lot of data in here, and some of it applies to hotels and restaurants, and some of it applies to industrial customers. So I'm going to try to move through that, quickly for your time. So yeah, we can get started, Linz. So basically, just to talk about lighting in general, just as a kind of a little history lesson, lighting used to be gas lamps, and so in over 200 years of technology changing, now we can truly talk about completely off-grid lighting for parking lots and exteriors of hotels and restaurants. Next slide. So I'm going to go through these pretty quick. This is basically talking about renewable energy and technologies advancing quite rapidly. So there's no secret that renewable energy output in the United States is going to more than double, and possibly because of COVID could even be higher output than that in the coming years. Next slide. So what's happening though is the technology is changing, and we've started this project 4 years ago. The costs were quite high for batteries and lights, and now we're seeing the costs are dramatically dropping as technology advances, and electric vehicles and a lot of other technologies are running sort of parallel in the market. So the major components that we're using in this technology are becoming cheaper. Next slide. So this basically talks about battery density, that it's theoretically just showing you that the batteries are getting less expensive, but also much more powerful. So I'll get to that in the next slide. So basically our system, when you're thinking about new construction or potentially renovations, everybody's got a parking lot, and you got outside lighting, you got safety lighting, you got pedestrian areas. So these systems basically work 100% off grid. So you wouldn't need Dominion Energy or Duke Energy for electrical permits, no underground wiring, no utility costs. So this particular system is based on generating power through wind and solar. And we have a solar only option. We'll get to that in a minute, but basically, so you're generating power throughout the day and night. And at night, when you need the lighting, we use motion sensing lights, and you'll light the parking lots and security areas where you need the security lighting will be there when you need it. Next slide. So really the major high level components of the system is completely off grid. No underground wires. Each light pole is independent, basically an independent power pole. So there's no digging, there's no power company. There's significant federal, state, and local, state, and federal and state incentives, tax incentives to invest in this technology. And also there's a way that we'll show you how it could be integrated with signage. So it kind of, because Colite is a sign company by historical matters, we can integrate some really nice designs. So basically you're sort of getting signage and your parking lot lighting as kind of a 2-for-1. So it actually ends up being quite a good investment when you think about your whole property, and getting basically, after the tax credits, you're basically getting the signage for free. Next slide. So I'm not going to bore you with some of this, but basically the technology is there. We analyze solar charts around every place where they're located. So we analyze the average sun per day. That's how we manage the system. Next slide. We also have done a lot of data and analyzing the wind. So basically you can see on this chart, one of the units would be, basically it's always generating power 24/7, whether it's windy, sunny, rainy. So the system you can see here on a day was very windy. The top slide, we're generating quite a bit of power during the night. And then as you see, of course, in the next day at 7:30 a.m. on that chart, you start generating solar power. So basically the system is complementing each other, always generating power. So when we charge in the batteries, we'll be able to have the output we need at night for the lighting. So next slide. So again, just solar is a very proven technology. We use one of the largest solar manufacturers in the world, but there's a variety of companies that do that. But it's exactly the exact same solar panel that would be on the roof of the restaurant or hotel we use on the light itself. So I'll show you this. So next slide, we'll just skip that one. So basically, if we use the turbine, this is quite an interesting technology. We've also developed with a company. So it's called vertical access wind, and it allows you to generate wind power at a very low wind speeds. But also what's really interesting about the technology is the wind can come from any direction. So it's quite interesting technology. It's very quiet. You know, we've got quite a few installed around the state, and some here at our facility at Colite here in Columbia. And the technology is very, very proven to work. Next slide. And this is an install in Anderson, but that just kind of shows you now how the technologies, like I said, this technology revolution is happening, is how we're integrating technologies that are proven. So solar panels are been around for 50 years. And what's quite interesting is, you know, a solar panel is used in the roof of a car. It's used in our sign and our lighting. So again, we're not really inventing technologies. We're integrating technologies to make it useful in another way that people hadn't thought of before. Next slide. And I'm just going to skip that. It's just the battery technology. So here's really what I want to show you is this is where we're really going with the signage components and how Colite operates is we're integrating the look of a property. So it is lighting for the parking lot, but it's also opportunities for branding. Like I said, you're sort of getting the signage for free on the pole because you could buy a sign separately and you buy your parking lot lights separately, and now you're sort of getting them together in one unit. Next slide. So here's where we really bring our design and our experience of 75 years of being in the sign business and the construction business is now we're sort of integrating opportunities to make the parking lot much more interesting or branded for the customer, to make it an interesting look. You can see here the Hampton Inn up there, which is a new one in West Palm, but also the designs are completely up to the customer. We can modify and change in a variety of ways to make the unit look modern. We can make it look old. We can make it look hip. We can do a lot of things to it. Next slide. So we're going to go through these pretty quick so I can keep it moving. So what's really interesting is the motion sensing technology is really sort of the holy grail for this system, because we can deliver up to 5-foot candles when the parking lot is active and people are moving around or cars are moving around. But at night, you know, when the restaurants are closed and midnight on, we can lower the rating of the lighting to eliminate not just wasting power, but we can also lower the light pollution and give you a good 1-foot candle of, you know, security lighting, which is pretty bright, but you don't need a whole lot of lighting at 2, 3, 4 a.m. But the system is adjustable, so we can make it completely adjustable to the customer's needs, whether it's a very high traffic location or a location that closes at 10 o'clock at night and nobody's there till the next morning. So there's a variety of ways we can make the system work for you. Next slide. So this is just dealing with photometrics. We deal with all that. We can show you what it's going to really look like. That's a very standard system. The next slide sort of shows you what a whole, next slide, please. I'm sorry. So next one, that's a hotel that we worked on. So that just kind of shows you eventually for each property with the site plan, we're going to show you exactly what the foot candles are based on requirements of whether it's a Starbucks requirements or a town of Beaufort requirements or City of Columbia requirements. We're going to be able to work with you and make sure the foot candles are going to meet those needs. We don't need to exceed it too much, but we don't want to underperform. So really that's what the whole photometrics process is all about. Next slide. So here we'll go ahead, one more slide. So we'll get into this. We're also designing a variety of applications for towns, green spaces, parks. This is what we call a trailblazer. It's a much more traditional looking light fixture that you can see on this one. Now it's solar only, doesn't have the wind turbine on it. So in South Carolina, of course, there's plenty of sun. So a lot of these systems, depending on what we want to do, would work without the wind turbine. But it's also, we have to analyze the system of how much light you're wanting to put out. But the solar only actually works quite well. And luckily in South Carolina, it's good for us. In other parts of the country, it's not going to work as well. Next slide. So now we have what we call a smart pole. And really this system is we can also offer you lighting. If you put it out by the pool, like we did for a Red Lion Hotel here locally, we can have a Wi-Fi extender. We can put, of course, we put the light on it, and we can put a security camera. So there's a lot of other features that you might want as an owner, whether it's putting a light pole in a parking lot with a camera on it and maybe 2 or 3 lights. There's a variety of ways we can help you do those things based on what you need. Next slide. So now we're just going to go through some, next slide, we'll just skip that one. We'll go through some basically installation, so you can just kind of see the variety of how the product looks. We've installed way over 100 units now, and we're really working around the country. A lot of installs in South Carolina. This is where we're located. It's the South Carolina Research Authority right off of Farrell Road. So there's quite a few here. You can see that's a picture of one of the wind turbines and the security camera in the bottom corner there. Next slide. So we've got just a bunch of installs. This is in Anderson. Really nice looking corporate headquarters. You can see the wind and solar looks really nice. It's probably about a half a mile long driveway. So really nice with the branding on it for the signage. Next one. This is a new install in Calhoun County, quite a large industrial park. Those are all solar only. And it's quite a long road that we did 24 units on. So save that customer thousands of dollars of underground wiring. This is Bluff Road Auto, so very easy to see. Bluff Road, not too far from the football stadium. Bluff Road and I-77 area. Nice looking installation with some signage. Next one, that's in Birmingham, Alabama. You can see now this one's sort of integrating now with rooftop solar. This is an installation in downtown Birmingham, working with the University of Alabama. That building there is going to be a completely study center for off-grid sustainability, part of the university's big plan to grow that market. Let's see, next one. So that's in Charleston. That's our only unit right now in Charleston that has the wind. Hopefully we'll have more, but that's at the Clemson Wind Institute Research Center there in the old Navy base. It's working quite well for a couple years now. This is just a small parking lot at Clemson at the university on the campus. So you can see just a dirt gravel parking lot that we illuminated without having to worry about running wires there. Next one. So that's an install in Spartanburg. Next one. Let's see that this is kind of nice looking. It just kind of shows you again where you can do some design features with the graphics and the signage. This is a entrance to a neighborhood in Simpsonville. Nice looking design. This is in Columbia. It's Hammond University, Hammond School. So it's kind of again showing you the design features. There's just a lot of flexibility you can make these units look interesting. Let's see the next one. Let's just skip that one. That's just in Charleston. That's in the floodplain. Not too exciting there. That's the Cinemark. That's the people in Plano, Texas. That's unfortunately right now nobody's going to the cinema, so that one's going to be delayed for a while. But that's at their corporate headquarters. Next one, I would think so here's a good one. So hotel, Colite does a lot of hotel signage. So we definitely see this as a market that we can bolt on to products for our hotel customers. We make Holiday Inn, Marriott, Hilton. We do a lot of work in that market. So this is a nice way to do the branding with the signage and the lighting combined. So that one's in Key West, and certainly could be a good one for us as a case study with the wind. And then this gets back to the security camera. So this is really interesting, our least expensive unit. It's easy to install. The next slide shows you a variety of installs. So basically you have a security light and we have a camera box on there. We partner with statewide security. They have the camera box, and we work with the city police, City of Columbia, West Columbia Sheriff's Department. And so if you have an issue and you can't get power or somewhere that you want a camera, but for some reason you're having a hard time having power there, we could do these units relatively easily and no permit required, and have a unit up and running literally in a couple of days if that's the case. And that's the case in all these where it was areas where power is not readily available. So we were able to put these systems up with a camera system. And let's skip that one. And then also, so basically, the other issue is retrofit lighting. So if you have a facility and you have old lighting inside or in the parking lot, you don't have to go off grid. We can basically upfit those light fixtures with new light fixtures. You get a significant cost of energy usage and also a rebate from the power company. The next slide will show you a parking lot, I think. Let's see. Yeah. So here's a great example of the Move Fitness on Forest Drive. Their old light fixtures are quite, over probably at least 10 years old. And you can see in the bottom picture where the LED lighting retrofit is, quite significant savings, but also the lighting enhancement is unbelievable. So relatively cheap fix if your lights are old. That's a relatively easy way to make the property look a lot better and safer. Let's see. And then last thing we're going to talk about is rooftop solar is a growing market. It's very good in South Carolina. There's good state incentives, but on top of the federal incentives. So hotels, maybe restaurants, maybe not, depending on the roof size. Certainly in the hotel market, it could be significant, good investment in the future, lowering the energy usage of the hotel itself, but also getting these tax credits while they're still available. This roof system basically sits on top of the roof. There's also systems that we're looking at that could be ground mounted, but probably not very practical for your market. But also parking decks, interesting. If there was a parking deck, we're looking at several big ones. You can make use of the top of the parking deck and they put solar on top, but that again probably wouldn't apply to these markets. Let's see what else. And the last thing is we're working with a company for EV charging. It's quite an interesting system. Basically, it's an on-grid solar EV charging. So the idea is for the hotels to give away the power while the customers are there charging, but they're collecting in a majority of that giveaway power during the day with the solar. So it's kind of a trade-off is you install this EV charging system, you collect the sun and power as much as possible during the day, and you're giving away that charging to your hotel customers with a little credit card either during the day or nighttime. So it's quite an interesting product that we've been working with for a year or so. I think that might be the end of my slides there. Yes, it is.
A couple questions. Okay. Is the battery box watertight in the event of major flood?
Okay, good question. So the battery box is not necessarily watertight. The batteries are protected, but if we are going into an area that there's prone to flooding, we do prefer to put the battery box up off the ground. So we have a concrete bollard design. I don't think it might have been in one of those slides. So we have the battery box about 3 feet off the ground on a concrete base. Okay, so I see the Red Lion reply. That's great. So yeah, I have seen it myself a couple times, but I haven't seen it at night.
Hey, Harold, there is one other question that came in. that came directly to the association here. It says, what source, when you have a dark, rainy, monsoon days, multiple monsoon days in a row, or winter time?
Yeah, good question. That's actually one of the slides I kind of blew through. So we have about 10 days of capacity in the batteries. So that's part of the whole system and learning that we've gone through. And then kind of goes back to, there's 3 elements to that. Number one, so we have better battery storage, which has improved a lot. Then there was a slide there, I guess when you go back and look, there's called Trojan batteries, are the biggest in the country, and the batteries have improved tremendously. So we have a lot of battery storage, but also because we're using the motion sensing lights, that's helped us reduce our light output on a typical unit. So we're not wasting as much lighting as possible. So, but yeah, 10 days, we've had many, many days here at Colite, 4, 5, 6 days in a row of really nasty cloudy weather, and our lights are always working. So yeah, it's designed for longevity. Somebody's asking for a phone number to reach. Yeah, you want to call me, my number is 803-606-7045. That's my cell. Marty, and this is Marty speaking.
Great. Thank you, Howard and Marty.
No problem. Yeah, we appreciate the invite.
Thank you for the opportunity and look forward to working with each one of you.
Thanks again.
Thanks, Randy.
Thank you. Take care.
Bobby, are you on?
Hello, I'm here.
We can hear you.
Good afternoon, everybody. We are thankful to have Mollie O'Dell as part of our virtual meeting this afternoon. Mollie serves as Vice President of Communications and Media Relations at the National Restaurant Association, and she loves to eat out, which is good to hear because, Mollie, I hope you're in South Carolina. We really need you. At the National Restaurant Association, Mollie is responsible for developing and implementing communication strategies to advance the restaurant industry and working with restaurant owners and operators to help continuously improve the dining experience for their customers. Her first job in the restaurant industry was at Jason's Deli as a teenager, joining the ranks of 50% of the adults who have worked in the restaurant industry at some point in their lives. Mollie has more than a decade of experience in public affairs and media. Additionally, she has extensive experience in grassroots public affairs. Welcome, Mollie.
Great. Thank you so much for that kind introduction. As a matter of fact, I am in Colombia right now.
Oh, great.
Actually, I was supposed to be getting married this weekend and moving from Washington, D.C. to South Carolina, to Columbia, where my fiance lives. My move is now happening a little bit differently than I had planned. We have rescheduled the wedding for September, but in DC, I gave my notice to leave my apartment by a certain date, and they are holding me to that date. So I am in Columbia, enjoying all of your restaurants. I'm enjoying all your parking lots in your restaurants, which is not in DC. But thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me to present during this call. I know everyone's days are insane, trying to keep up with what's happening, trying to feed our families, make sure our dogs don't destroy our homes, any number of things feel like they're happening. So I want to spend the next few minutes talking about what the National Restaurant Association has been doing in terms of our communication strategy throughout this crisis. You'll hear me talk a little bit about some of the major legislative moments that we've had over the last 6 weeks. But what my role is at the association is to take all of these major legislative moments that we have, the major enterprise moments. And when I say enterprise, that's really everything that doesn't touch a policy. So that's related to any kind of statistics that are happening, what's going on with our training and certification offerings, and just generally telling the story of the industry. So when this started, It was the same week as our public affairs conference. So it was the first week of March. We kind of sat down and needed to think through who are our main audiences here? Who are we going to be talking to for the duration of this crisis? And how do we craft messages that can appeal to those three audiences? So our three audiences are diners, the media, which is where most of our customers receive their information, and policymakers, the people who are holding our fate in their hands over as they meet and make decisions about what's happening with the restaurant industry and with the reopening altogether. So this is kind of an idea about who we're talking to. And then we set out to determine what do we want them to know. And we came up with three key messages that I'm going to go through pretty quickly here. And then I'm going to give an overview of where we were, where we are right now, and where we're headed. And that will just kind of give a timeline of what the National Restaurant Association has been doing, how we've been working on behalf of our members. I've got a slide that's got some resources on it, and then I'm happy to take whatever questions I can answer, I will, and the ones that I can't, we are in near constant contact with one another, and so I can commit to finding you an answer ASAP. So here on this slide, we're asking the question, what do we want them to know? Them being those key audiences, diners, media, policymakers. And kind of first and foremost, we always want to put the context and the size and scope of our industry in context for our audience. The nation's restaurant industry is the nation's second largest private sector employer. We're home to 15.6 million employees, which comes out, to about 10% of the US workforce. So those are big numbers. Elected officials certainly know, and people who work on the tax base at the local, state, local, and federal level, that restaurants and our employees are a key economic driver in communities. And on the very restaurant-centric level, your restaurant or your company is home to, we say Serve Safe certified employees here because that's our product, but the workforce is certified, and there is quite a bit of training and certification that goes into the food service production in this country. We have a number of programs, Serve Safe, they're listed here. I have not added to this list, but in the last 5 weeks, Serve Safe has come out with two dedicated programs, I believe, around takeout and delivery. And those are being offered for free through the end of April on the Serve Safe website. Additionally, the Serve Safe food handler training module is also being offered for free on the Serve Safe website. So if you have employees who need to brush up on their skills or want to take advantage of some of these free programs, they're available. And finally, we want people to know, in terms of our trained and skilled workforce, that the result of that workforce and all of our investments in it has been that our industry is among the most highly regarded industries in the company. So Gallup every year, end of August, beginning of September, comes out with their list of highest ranked industries, and the restaurant and food service industry, I believe is the classification for it, is consistently ranked either at the very top or in the top two, nearly tied with the computer industry for America's most highly regarded. So that is a bit of good news in this crisis, is that we know that Americans love restaurants, they love going out to eat, and that there will be, and that there already is, some pent-up demand. So kind of when the shackles come off, people will want to go to restaurants. Next up, what do we want people to know? Our second key message is that reopening our dining rooms is going to require partnership with all levels of government and our customers. So as we are talking to diners and policymakers and the media, we do always want to reinforce for them that every restaurant follows a strict set of guidelines set forth by state and local health departments. The idea around food safety and food security is going to be paramount going into this reopening phase. So I think we always want to lead in this area with our commitment to safety. Our training and certification is in our DNA. As an industry, we repeatedly emphasize the importance of proper food handling and service techniques. Our employees take tests, and then they take more tests and recertify at regular intervals. And so we like to underscore, and just to make, this may not be something that people who have never worked in the restaurant industry know, that for food handlers, for people behind the bar, there is a level of training and certification that happens that we take quite seriously. And this last message is specifically around targeting policymakers, but we need to be clear that more recovery funds are needed. The CARES Act, which John talked about, the PPP at the very beginning of this call, was a good first step, but as he noted, it's out of money. And more recovery funds are going to be needed in order to give every industry a fair shot, especially the restaurant and food service industry that has sustained many frontline workers and first responders throughout this crisis. Our third key message, and this one is geared a little bit more towards the reopening. We're starting to think about reopening. We're starting to think about what that might look like. What kind of messaging, where consumer sentiment is. So we have good research that says there's pent up demand, so they want to go to restaurants, but we need to dig a little bit deeper and find out, we know you want to go, but what are you worried about when you go? And what would make you feel better whenever you went? So that we can help the industry restore some of the joy that people feel when they get to go out and share a meal with friends and family outside of their home. So we're using this hashtag, restaurants are here. It's been a hashtag we're beginning to tag some of the good news stories around what restaurants are doing in their communities with that hashtag. If you have stories about the great things that restaurants are doing in South Carolina, please send them to me. We aggregate them all, include them in our newsletters that come out every week. Right now we're at newsletters 3 times a week. And we would just love to have those stories. We'd love to have them when we go and talk to members of Congress about what's happening, whenever we talk to our social audiences. And it's just good information to have and reflects what is so wonderful about this industry. So key message, restaurants are here, and we hope very soon to have a table for you. This message kind of originated out of the notion that for this industry, this crisis has been deeply personal for us as well. Our customers are our friends, our families, our colleagues, and our neighbors, and we're always going to put the health and wellness of them first. We are additionally committed to the communities that we're privileged to serve, and we take that commitment seriously and do not want to do anything that is going to put those communities at risk. And finally, we're open. It's caveated with we're open for takeout and delivery, but we want people to know that we continue to be here to serve our customers. So I want to spend the rest of my time drinking sweet tea and talking about where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. And this is just kind of a top line overview of some key moments in the timeline of the narrative of the National Restaurant Association during this crisis. So February 28th was the day that we stood up a pretty rickety looking web page that had some high level information from the CDC on this. It had some frequently asked questions and some information from ServSafe that was largely borrowed from the information that they had put out early on about norovirus, because back in February, the CDC was urging people to think about this like norovirus and take those kinds of precautions with hand washing and things like that. We have progressed wildly since then, and I believe hopefully in the next week, we'll be rolling out a completely refreshed COVID-19 page that will be much more user-friendly and lay out all of the different aspects and response mechanisms that we've had. But February 28th was when this first started for us. February 28th to March 18th, Congress has now, it has become enough of a crisis that Congress has seen this, enough people have engaged, and they have passed a bill in record time. That was the Families First Corona Response Act, in part to discourage layoffs and in part to guarantee paid leave to workers who needed to stay home due to the COVID-19 emergency. So that is working in pretty quick order for a Congress that often takes years and years to do anything. Also on Wednesday, March 18th, that was kind of our line in the sand day at the National Restaurant Association. Our first round of research came back that said that the industry was going to sustain at least $225 billion in losses and be forced to eliminate between 5 to 7 million jobs over the next 3 months. So those pieces of information kind of became our rallying cry. And between March 18th and March 27th, Congress got their act together and managed to pass the CARES Act that expanded unemployment insurance and benefits and developed the Paycheck Protection Program along with a number of other programs, small business loan programs, emergency disaster loan programs designed to help businesses weather the storm. The Paycheck Protection Program did have a restaurant carve out, meaning that restaurants that had more than 500 and the employee threshold for getting a PPP loan was applied to each location and not to the company as a whole. So that was a really important carve out for large, large employers who have franchisees who did not want to be counted as an employee of an organization that would have more than 500 employees. So Friday, March 27th, CARES Act happens. We are now just a few weeks into that. And as we noted earlier, the CARES Act was a good first start, but more needs to be done. In that vein, on Thursday, April 9th, we sent another letter to Congress noting that the relief funds were envisioned to be a vital tool to help restaurants bridge the crisis, but there were increased warning signs that more relief was going to be needed. And I think you will see the National Restaurant Association coming out early next week with a more formalized plan of what we're calling COVID-4 needs to look like. And that will just be the fourth bill in the COVID series. The Restaurants Act site has launched. I think John alluded earlier to all reaching out and getting in touch with your members of Congress and telling them what you're experiencing and what you need. The Restaurants Act site is a great tool to do that and gives specified information for each state and locality and is updated real time. So I urge you all to check that out. So that's kind of a very high level summary of where we've been. This is taken from a near day-by-day timeline that I've been constructing just for us to have for association records. If you're interested in the longer document, I would gladly provide it to you. So where we are. This is research that we actually are meeting in 10 or 15 minutes to talk about. I swipe the preview sheet to include in this presentation, so maybe don't tell anyone that because this information's not out yet, but it will be. Our most recent round of polling reveals that 8 million restaurant employees have been laid off or furloughed. The restaurant and food service industry will lose more than $50 billion in sales this month, and that's on top of the $30 billion in sales lost at the end of March. Next, 88% of operators say they've laid off or furloughed employees, and another 97% of restaurant operators say their total dollar sales volume is lower than it was over the last April 1 to April 10 is lower than it was in 2019. These are grim numbers. This is what some inside of our organization refer to as the misery index. this is hard stuff to see. It's hard stuff to read. The only redeeming piece of this information is that it gives us a place from which to start, in which to share with members of Congress and other policymakers to continue to make the case that we need significant aid and significant relief dollars. So that is where we are as of 4:40 this afternoon. Where are we going? Tonight at 6 p.m., the internet tells me that President Trump is going to host a press conference and lay out what a reopening plan looks like. I have no insights into what that is going to be, but I do know that Marvin Irby, our interim president and CEO, was named to the White House COVID-19 recovery group. And so the National Restaurant Association is sitting at the table as the federal government starts to work through what this is going to look like. Additionally, they have said countless times that it's going to be highly focused on state governors. And so our state and local affairs team, alongside the team at the South Carolina Restaurant and Lodging Association, will definitely be working closely with everyone to figure out where we're going next after this. A few pieces of resources and where you can find more information. I mentioned restaurant.org/COVID-19. There you can find information on legislation and regulations. If you're a restaurant owner and operator, every day and a half, we're posting new content around operation tips and articles for this new environment. There is a thrice weekly newsletter that goes out Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It's available. Someone was talking earlier about whether or not to keep materials just to members or to open it up to anyone who wants to sign up. Then similarly, the national organization has made the same decision that a rising tide lifts all boats, and we want all restaurant owners and operators to have access to good information and factual information. So does not matter if you're a member, you can sign up for our newsletter. There's also some frequently asked questions on that page and links to our business resource directory. Restaurantsact.com is the state and local portal. There you can access the grassroots take action information and see information specific to South Carolina. And finally, we like to push folks whenever we can to our social media platforms. We post there on the regular. Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook is often more newsy type articles. And then We Are Restaurants is our Instagram page. And I put that on here in recognition that sometimes we need to get away for, even if it is for 15 seconds, and look at some pretty pictures of food and maybe not think about COVID-19 if it's possible. So if you don't follow us on Instagram, follow us on Instagram. There's some lovely photos there. And here is my contact information. Feel free to reach out to me via email, or if you want my cell phone number, I can pass that around as well. And so that concludes my presentation. Not sure who I'm handing it off to at this point, or are there questions? Let me see.
I don't see any questions in the chat box as it speaks right now. Last chance for questions for Mollie. Anybody? Well, Mollie, thank you very much. This is certainly a lot of information, and you went through it great. And I'll turn it over to Lindsay to close everything out.
Hi, everybody. Thank you again for joining us today. A couple of announcements about our Hospitality Employee Relief Fund that we launched last week. We have had an overwhelming amount of support for that. In the past week, we've raised about $36,000 and hope to raise a little bit more over the next couple evenings. We have launched a virtual concert series with a couple of businesses around Columbia, and we're hoping to expand that in the next couple weeks. There's some information on your screen about how you can join our virtual concert series. Our second one will take place this evening at 5:30. If you go to our Facebook page, there is a link that you can click and you'll automatically be in the concert stream. And then tomorrow night, Discover South Carolina, SCPRT, and Capital City Lake Murray Country Regional Tourism Board has generously offered to host another concert for us with country music star Cody Webb, and that can be live streamed on Capital City Lake Murray Country's Facebook page. So again, thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you again tonight virtually. We can cheers over happy hour. Thanks, y'all.
Great. Thanks, Lindsay. We hope you all have a great day, and thank you for joining the meeting.